As many of you know, the Andrews Labor government have introduced the Covid-19 Omnibus Emergency Measures and Other Acts Bill 2020. Now, this bill was forced through the lower house of Parliament last week and will be debated in the upper house in mid-October. What the government proposes in this bill will fundamentally change the way that we live, because this bill seeks to expand the government's ability to control and punish us for doing things which, in many other times, may not even be against the law. So I want to be clear with you about why so many people are so concerned about these changes. Change 1. Section 250 of the bill allows the head of the Department of Health and Human Services to appoint a person they consider appropriate for appointment based on their skills, attributes, experience or otherwise to be an authorised officer. Now, it sounds harmless, but at the moment the head of the Department of Health and Human Services can only appoint people directly employed by the government to be authorised officers. This change will mean that instead of ensuring our COVID response is carried out by police officers, healthcare workers and other people directly responsible to the government, our COVID response can now be carried out by literally anyone who the department head thinks is appropriate. And by anyone, I mean someone like their neighbour or their mate. This is hugely concerning, because the last time the Andrews Labor government chose to use non-government personnel to do their job for them, they triggered the hotel quarantine fiasco, which has now led to more than 700 Victorian deaths since July. It's worse than a cop-out. It's a complete abandonment of responsibility. Change 2. Section 252 of the bill will allow the government to keep innocent Victorians locked up when they may have not done anything wrong. The law states that where an authorised officer reasonably believes that an individual is a high-risk person, they can be detained. Now, a high-risk person, amongst other things, is someone that an authorised officer reasonably thinks will not follow public health directive. So let's recap. If an authorised officer subjectively thinks that you aren't going to follow the rules, they can detain you. But more than this, they can detain you against your will for as long as they subjectively think you won't follow the rules. Now, many of us would agree that you do the crime, you do the time. But what this effectively means is that even if you haven't done the crime, the Andrews Labor government can lock you up and make you do the time purely because they subjectively think that you're the kind of person who is likely to do the crime at a later point in time. Now, this allows the Victorian Labor government to effectively play judge, jury and jailer all at once. Change 3. Finally, and in connection with the powers I've just mentioned, authorised officers now have the power to enter a person's home or seize a person's property without first obtaining a warrant. Now, in a democracy, taking someone's property away from them or entering their home against their will is a very serious thing. It can normally only be done where police officers are certain that a person has been involved or will soon commit a crime. But under this legislation, the approval of a judge is no longer needed. These authorised officers, people who may be private security guards and don't even work for the government, will be able to force their way into your home and arrest you or seize your property if they think you're not following the rules or that you're likely to break the rules in the future. So that's why my colleagues and I have wholeheartedly rejected this bill. But don't take our word for it. Just look at the 14 Queen's Counsels, senior lawyers and former judges with hundreds of years' worth of combined experience who wrote a letter outlining the dangers of this bill. Take the word of the Victorian Bar Association, the body that represents all Victorian barristers, whose president believes that this bill will allow for the creation of rules which, quote, cannot be justified under Victoria's Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities. This offensive power grab is yet another example of how the Andrews Labor government has no respect for the rights of Victorians. The increased power that Victorian Labor seeks is completely contrary to our democracy and to the rule of law, and that's why it is important to remember that the fight is not over yet. Like we saw with the State of Emergency Bill, crossbenchers have the power to stop this bill. If the crossbench in the Legislative Council vote against this bill with the coalition, then this bill will be defeated. We need your help to stop the upper house from giving Dan the upper hand. So join me, again, by phoning, emailing and contacting crossbenchers to make these views loud and clear. Victorians do not want their freedoms sacrificed, and they do not want their democracy further undermined.